When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the world was stunned by the scale and speed of the assault. The international community quickly realized that military action alone wouldn't be enough to respond. So the world hit back with sweeping economic sanctions, targeting Russia's economy and its most powerful institutions. These measures were designed to isolate Moscow financially and send a clear message that aggression would come at a steep price. The most dramatic move? Freezing $300 billion of Russia's central bank assets, mostly in Europe, especially at Belgium's Euroclear, one of the world's largest financial clearinghouses. This was an unprecedented action in modern economic history. This cut Moscow off from its hard-earned financial cushion, aiming to squeeze its war machine and limit its ability to fund the invasion. Suddenly, Russia's rainy day fund was out of reach, but as the war dragged on, the West faced a dilemma. What to do with this mountain of frozen cash? The money sat idle, locked away, while the conflict raged on and Ukraine's needs mounted. Calls grew louder to use the money for Ukraine's defense and reconstruction, with many arguing that Russia should pay for the destruction it caused. The idea gained traction among politicians, activists, and ordinary citizens alike, yet legal and political barriers loomed. Sovereign immunity protects state assets from seizure, and leaders feared setting a precedent that could shake global trust in Western banks. The debate became a test of international law and financial norms. The freeze was just the opening move in a high-stakes economic chess match, with each side weighing its next step carefully. As Ukraine's needs grew more urgent, the debate shifted from punishment to financial justice, how to turn frozen assets into real help for a nation under siege. The world watched as Europe, not Washington, held the keys to Russia's frozen fortune and the responsibility to decide its fate. The fate of these assets would shape not just the war, but the future of international finance, setting a precedent for how the world responds to aggression in the years to come. By late 2025, with the war grinding on and the front lines shifting only by inches, Ukraine's resilience was being tested like never before. Cities lay in ruins, and the human cost mounted daily, while the world watched anxiously. With US support wavering and political divisions deepening in Washington, the European Union realized it could no longer wait for others to act. The responsibility to support Ukraine now rested squarely on Europe's shoulders. Led by Ursula von der Leyen, the EU unveiled a historic $140 billion reparations loan for Ukraine, an unprecedented move, backed by Russia's frozen assets held in European banks. The plan was simple but bold. Ukraine would receive the funds immediately, giving it a lifeline in its darkest hour. If Russia refused to pay reparations in the future, the frozen assets would be used to repay the debt. This wasn't outright confiscation, but a clever legal workaround, a de facto seizure, cleverly disguised as a loan, sidestepping the thorniest international legal obstacles. France and Germany, long wary of the legal and diplomatic risks, finally agreed to back the plan. The urgency of Ukraine's survival and the threat to European security left them little choice. Belgium, home to the financial giant Euroclear where much of Russia's money was held, demanded that all EU members share the risk equally, fearing a wave of Russian lawsuits and retaliation. The plan became a crucible for European unity, forcing every nation to put its commitment to Ukraine, and to each other, to the test. Ukraine wasted no time, immediately announcing major arms deals for French Rafale and Swedish Gripen jets, signaling a new phase in its defense strategy. The loan wasn't just for rebuilding shattered cities, it was a direct investment in Ukraine's military strength, enabling rapid procurement of advanced weaponry and critical supplies. The EU's financial gambit had become a weapon in its own right, turning economic power into a force on the battlefield and sending a clear message to Moscow. The reparations loan moved swiftly, from theory to reality, capturing headlines worldwide and reshaping the trajectory of the war in ways few had anticipated. Europe's economic maneuver was about to become a decisive act of both war and defense, blurring the lines between finance and conflict. The stakes had never been higher, and the world braced for the consequences of Europe's boldest move yet. The EU's plan to use Russian assets as collateral walks a legal tightrope. Sovereign immunity, a bedrock of international law, protects state assets from seizure. By calling it a loan, the EU claims it's not confiscation, but critics see little difference. The move risks spooking countries like China and Saudi Arabia, who may rethink holding reserves in euros or dollars. Even the European Central Bank warned this could damage the euro's reputation. To test the waters, the EU started by sending interest earned on the frozen assets, nearly $7 billion in 2024, to Ukraine. This sidestep avoided direct confrontation, but Russia called it theft and threatened lawsuits. If Moscow wins in court, the financial fallout could be massive, especially for Belgium and Euroclear. The EU is betting that helping Ukraine outweighs the legal and financial risks. It's a high-stakes gamble, rewriting the rules of global finance in real time. As Europe advanced its reparations loan, the US unveiled a rival plan, sparking a transatlantic showdown that would test the unity and resolve of the Western alliance like never before. The Trump administration floated a sweeping 28-point peace plan, proposing to use the same $300 billion in frozen Russian assets that Europe was eyeing for Ukraine's recovery. But instead of channeling the funds directly to Ukraine, the US wanted $100 billion earmarked for American companies to lead the reconstruction, ensuring Washington would take half the profits from rebuilding efforts. The remainder would be funneled into a US-Russia investment fund, effectively sidelining both Europe and Ukraine from the decision-making process and future economic benefits. This approach would leave European taxpayers shouldering much of Ukraine's reconstruction bill, while American firms stood to gain the most. The EU scrambled to finalize its own loan package, racing against the clock to secure the assets before the US could strike a separate deal with Russia. If Europe acted first, the assets would be legally committed, rendering the American plan irrelevant and locking in European priorities. Suddenly, the unity of the Western alliance was at risk, with old friends now finding themselves on opposite sides of a high-stakes financial and political battle. Washington threatened new tariffs and hinted it could restrict European banks' access to the dollar system, a move that would be devastating for Europe's economy and financial stability. The US also ramped up pressure on Euroclear, the Belgian clearinghouse, holding much of the frozen Russian money, intensifying the standoff. This wasn't just about money, it was about who would shape the post-war order and which vision for Ukraine's future would prevail. The fate of $300 billion hung in the balance with Imperium with the world's eyes fixed on every move. As the drama unfolded, the world watched in real time as allies became rivals, and the future of Ukraine and the global order was up for grabs. Russia's response was immediate and fierce, calling the EU's plan outright theft. The Kremlin threatened to seize Western corporate assets in Russia, worth tens of billions. Moscow had already taken control of companies like Danone and Carlsberg, showing it meant business. But by expropriating private assets, Russia weakened its own legal case for sovereign immunity. The West argued that Russia's actions undermined its right to legal protection. Russia's threats went further, hinting at cyber attacks and disruptions to energy and food markets. The goal: inflict economic pain and fracture European unity. Each side's escalation risked provoking the other, fueling a dangerous cycle. The economic war was just beginning. For Ukraine, the EU's reparations loan is a lifeline. After years of war, Ukraine's economy is shattered, with a budget gap of $65 billion, rising to $155 billion with military costs. Without foreign aid, collapse is inevitable. The EU's loan would almost close this gap, keeping the government running and the army fighting. With US support uncertain, Ukraine's survival now depends on Europe. The funds will buy advanced weaponry and keep basic services afloat. The loan is designed to give Ukraine the strength to resist and negotiate peace from a position of power. Without it, Ukraine faces economic and military disaster. The stakes: national survival. The EU's $300 billion move could trigger a Russian counterstrike on a staggering scale. Moscow could nationalize all Western assets in Russia, worth up to $288 billion. But the real danger is a strategic default on Russian debt, inflicting huge losses on Western banks. Russia could also weaponize its role as a key supplier of energy, metals, and fertilizers, sparking global price shocks. The economic fallout could reach $1 trillion, plunging the world into recession. Such a war would devastate both sides, isolating Russia for decades, but inflicting pain worldwide. For the Kremlin, if it faces an existential threat, it may see little left to lose. The EU's gamble could unleash an economic storm no one can control.